So the next couple videos are all projects I made before the holidays. I was working on a ton of stuff before the holidays, so some of the videoing is a little incomplete. I was just had a bunch of very strict deadlines, so recording kind of comes secondary to getting stuff done, unfortunately. So this project is actually a Christmas present. One of my neighbors is giving his wife. He had saved all of her horse riding ribbons from when she used to ride horses, and he wanted to put them in a nice decorative frame. I thought it was a super thoughtful Christmas gift, and it ended up being a pretty cool build. This barn wood off of a garage they were tearing down in my neighborhood. They gave it to me for free, so I planed up a bunch of it. The barnwood in this video is actually cut in half already at this point. Since it's really old lumber, it's still very straight and true, so I didn't have to joint it or anything. I knew I would be using it for 3 projects, so like I said, I just planed down a bunch of it and then had a little bit left over. The goal was to just clean it up, get all the old paint and scuff marks off of it before using it. And the cool thing was that these 3 projects were going to people locally, so it was kind of neat, and people always appreciate not only reclaimed lumber but lumber that was sourced locally, a building that they remember, and now it was going to become part of their finished piece. So after I had it planed down, I ripped this into sections, and I left them long. In the wintertime, I have heat in my shop, but if I have to cut something that's too long, I usually have to open the door. So then I would just rough cut it, cross cut it down on my radial arm saw. You could see in the background is a mantle I also built out of this same lumber, and that is the project I probably won't show film because I don't have finished video of it. So to join this frame, I'm going to be using box joints just because they're going to be visible. So it's a nice look to the piece, as well as the fact that it will be extremely sturdy. So I made this box jointing jig a couple years ago. It still works. It's a very simple jig. There's tons of videos on YouTube showing how to make these if you want to make one. I just had to drill some holes into my miter gauge because it's a stock gauge, and then I could attach it and cut all of my pieces. So as I showed before, I always do a test cut on these because sometimes there's a little bit of tweaking to be done, and then I put a 1/4 inch dado stack in my blade, and I could just use the jig to cut all those finger joints. You could see as I'm cutting them, it's pretty quick because this is a thin piece of lumber, and I flip it end over end and then cut it so that the finger joints on both edges are the same. Then, since these finger joints are very tight, I always test fit it just enough to make sure it'll fit, and then I pop it apart and glue it all together. So the nice thing about finger joints are there's a ton of gluing surface. Anytime you can multiply your gluing surface with your joints, it will make the joint that much stronger. It's one of the main reasons this sort of joint is stronger than butt joints. There's a couple reasons, but one of the big ones is you just multiply the surface area that you can get glue on, because modern day glues are usually stronger than the lumber itself. As you can see, I'm just tapping everything into place, and then once I found a spot to put it so it could dry overnight, I checked my diagonals to make sure that this was square. The nice thing about this was, since it was finger joints, it went square pretty much by itself. So on the back side, I'm going to be putting a plain backer, so I have a rabbiting bit. I believe this was a 1/4 bit, and the backer panel I'm putting on there is about a 1/4. So I just went through and rabbited the back side of my whole piece. You could see that one edge that has a knot that goes all the way through. I shouldn't have used that lumber in the first place. It ended up being a pain pretty much the whole build, and at one point it actually breaks. So this is the backer I'm using. Over the summer I made a bar for someone, and I used this. It's actually masonite that has a pseudo sort of reclaimed lumber look to it, and it actually worked really well for this. So I had scrap, and that's what I used as the backer. So the inside of this frame is going to hold ribbons, so I'm just cutting some strips of maple in order to hold those ribbons. The ribbons have nice clips on the back, so I just cut this strips of maple, gauged them off of those clips. Now, so there was some math involved in this because the ribbons were all kind of different sizes, the tail piece of the ribbon. So I took the 3 different sizes, and that is how I figured out where to put these. The green one on the bottom, the tail is longer than the white ribbons. So I had this, the layout for these 3 strips are not symmetrical. You'll kind of be able to see that in the video. So this is the back side of the piece, and I'm just cutting some mortises in the back so those strips can fit in. I could add some glue to them and they won't be able to move around, and they'll be nice and sturdy. So it was just a process of lining it up. I measured from the top down to the maple, so I made sure that they were even on both sides, and then just remove the excess, and you could see it fits in there nicely. So then this is the backer in place, and I just drew some lines on it showing me where, since it is rabbited, showing me where that barnwood ends. It's about 1 inch thick, that barnwood. So I made some marks, and then I could just screw this backer into place. I countersunk all my holes. It just gives it a nice clean look. Even though this will be against the wall, it just looks so much better when everything's lined up nicely. And I just went around the whole frame and attached that backer. So then this is going to open in the front. So now that the backer's in there and it's a little secure, I could go through and trim off the front side of the frame, and that will be the part that will open. I believe this was about 1 inch, about 1 inch of material I took off. The ribbons are pretty flat, so at the end of the day I think this whole thing was about 2.5 inches thick. You could see that last cut is when that bottom knot actually broke apart, so I had to glue that knot piece back into place. So then there is my frame. So on the frame, I'm going to be putting a piece of Plexi. The Plexi itself is very thin. I think it's actually a little bit thinner than 1/8 of an inch, but I still used a rabbiting bit to cut a groove, and then I could just raise and lower that rabbiting bit and it will get you the depth that you want. So this, like I said, this is about 1/8 of an inch. I could go around the frame and just cut that groove again so the Plexi will sit flush with the frame. To cut Plexi, you need a plexiglass cutter, which is the blue device in my hand. You could also use a razor blade. I've used that as well, but someone gave me this and it's convenient to have. The Plexi I got was from Lowe's. I was lucky they had a piece I needed in the size I needed in stock. This is almost 3 feet by 4 feet. So I ended up trimming about 1 inch off of the sides. 3 feet by 2 feet is almost the size of the frame. And then you just snap it off. You score it a couple times and then you could just snap the Plexi right in half. So the top side is going to have a very simple decorative detailing. So that's the leftover barnwood. I cut a slight angle into it, and I'll end up using both halves of those angles. So I could put the Plexi in place, take that angled piece of barnwood, this is the exact same material, cut a 45 on the edge, and then I would tack it into place, and I just move my way around the frame. So this side I will trim off, the bottom side I'll trim off, and then cut the other piece in place. So I'll cut that 45 on one side, go to the other edge, and cut it into place, and it gave me a nice even outer frame to hold that Plexi in place. So you can kind of see it in this video. Right now I added 2 supports on the top side of the frame. I didn't show you how I did it because I ended up taking those out. This frame is so big I was nervous about the Plexi being able to flex on the inside of the frame, but I actually changed it afterwards because I hated the way it looked. So you could kind of see where I had those 2 supports. I took them out and instead I added 45s in the corner, and then I took that other piece of the cut bevel and added it the exact same way I did the outside frame, yet on the inside of the frame. So the edge of this is going to be attached with a piano hinge, and this is kind of the part where I don't have a ton of great footage. For the piano hinge, I cut a shallow rabbet on the side so that it will sit flush. You kind of see the indent, and then I could lay the piano hinge in place. Then I would drill, so it's in place now, and I attached it with just 2 screws on the bottom side of the piece. I then took it out, had it lined up with the top side, and then screwed 2 holes into the top side the exact same way, so that when I flipped the top back onto the bottom, I could realign with the holes I already had and finish up that piano hinge. These are the finished photos. A couple things I didn't show was I put a clear coat on this, and the back side, it's hung on the wall. Lowe's sells metal French cleats, which work really well, and the side of it also has a clasp. You can see it there. The customer, once the ribbons are in place, you won't really need to take them in and out, but I wanted the frame to be able to open, obviously, to put them in there. And this is basically the finished product.